a family where so many seem to crave the world's attention, there is one royal who has spent her entire life quietly running in the opposite direction. She has never given a tell-all interview. She has never sought a flattering headline. She has never, not for a single moment, appeared to want the spotlight at all. And yet, in one of the great quiet ironies of royal life, it is precisely because she never chased fame that she has become, in the eyes of many, the most respected member of the entire royal family. Her name is Princess Anne, and today, I want to tell you about the remarkable and remarkably private life of the royal who never wanted to be seen. Because behind that famously no-nonsense exterior lies a story of extraordinary grit, quiet sacrifice, and a woman who chose substance over spectacle at every single turn. This is the Princess Anne you were never really meant to notice, and once you truly see her, you may never look at royalty the same way again. Let's begin with the simple truth that shapes everything about her. Anne has always been happiest away from the cameras. For decades, as younger, flashier royals have grabbed the headlines and the magazine covers, Anne has simply got on with her work, largely under the radar, exactly the way she likes it. She has never courted the press, never played the celebrity, never traded on her fame. In fact, she seems to actively dislike the whole circus of royal attention. And this isn't a pose or an act. It runs to the very core of who she is. Anne genuinely believes that the job matters more than the person doing it. That duty is something you perform quietly and well, not something you turn into a performance. In an age obsessed with being seen, she is that rarest of things, a public figure who would honestly rather not be public at all. And to understand where that comes from, you have to look at the one thing that has always mattered to her far more than any crown: horses. Because before she was known as the hardest-working royal, Anne was something even more extraordinary. She was a genuine, world-class athlete. And this is a part of her story that far too few people know. As a young woman, Anne was a supremely gifted equestrian, competing at the very highest level of the sport, not as a royal dabbling in a hobby, but as a serious elite competitor. In 1971, at just 21 years old, she won the individual title at the European Eventing Championships, riding a horse she had bred and trained herself, named Doublet. It was a stunning achievement. And that same year, the British public voted her the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, one of the highest honors in British sport. Think about that. Not a royal award, not a ceremonial title handed to her by birth. An award voted for by the public, honoring her genuine skill and grit as an athlete. To this day, Anne and her daughter Zara remain the only members of the royal family ever to have won it. She didn't earn that through her bloodline. She earned it in the saddle, through sweat, courage, and years of hard work. And that tells you everything about the kind of person she is. She wanted to be respected for what she could actually do, not for who she happened to be born. But her journey in the sport also brought heartbreak, the kind that shapes a person forever. Anne had been set to represent Britain at the 1972 Munich Olympics on Doublet, the very horse that had carried her to glory. But in a cruel twist of fate, shortly before the games, Doublet shattered a hind leg and had to be put down. For Anne, who had bred and raised and loved that horse, it was a devastating blow, and she withdrew from the Olympics, her dreams shattered along with it. And yet, this is where you see her true character. She didn't give up. 4 years later, in 1976, she made it to the Olympic Games in Montreal after all, this time riding her mother, the Queen's horse, Goodwill, and becoming the very first member of the British royal family ever to compete in the Olympics. It should have been a triumphant moment. But during the grueling cross-country phase, Anne took a terrible fall and suffered a serious concussion. She was dazed, injured, and could easily have stopped. Instead, she got back on her horse and finished the course. To this day, she reportedly cannot even remember the final jumps because she completed them while concussed, running on nothing but sheer determination and refusal to quit. Just imagine the toughness that takes. That is not a pampered princess. That is a warrior. And she did it all not for glory or attention, but simply because she had started something and was going to finish it, no matter what. There's a small detail from those Olympic years that captures just how much she was treated and wanted to be treated as a genuine athlete rather than a princess. At the 1976 Games, All female competitors were required to undergo gender verification testing before they could compete. Anne was the only athlete granted an exemption from that test. And yet, far from using her royal status to demand special treatment, everything about her approach to the sport was the opposite. She trained as hard as anyone, fell as hard as anyone, and asked for no favors on the course. She wanted to earn her place on merit, to be judged by the same brutal standards as every other rider, and to succeed or fail entirely on her own ability. For a young woman who could so easily have coasted through life on privilege alone, that hunger to prove herself in the toughest possible arena tells you something profound about her character. Anne has never wanted anything handed to her. She has always wanted to earn it. And in the demanding, dangerous world of elite eventing, where a single mistake can end in serious injury, she earned every ounce of the respect she won. That competitive fire never really left her either. Even after her own riding days were behind her, Anne poured herself into the administrative side of the sport she loved, serving for years as president of the international governing body of equestrian sport, following directly in the footsteps of her father, Prince Philip, who had held the same role. She became a member of the International Olympic Committee and played a genuine part in London's successful bid to host the 2012 Olympic Games. And when those games came, and her own daughter Zara won her silver medal, it was Anne herself as a senior Olympic figure who was there in that world, the proud mother and the dedicated official all at once. Her love of sport was never a passing royal hobby. It was a lifelong devotion, pursued with the same seriousness and commitment she brings to everything. That same fierce desire to protect people from the pressures of royal life shows itself most beautifully in the way she raised her own children. When Anne had her son Peter and her daughter Zara, she made a decision that stunned many at the time. She chose for them not to carry royal titles at all. No His Royal Highness, no Her Royal Highness, no prince or princess. She wanted them to grow up as ordinary children, free to build their own lives and their own careers, without the crushing weight of royal expectation and constant public scrutiny bearing down on them. She has spoken about this choice with her characteristic bluntness, remarking that most people would agree there are real downsides to having titles, and that giving her children a normal life was probably the right thing to do. And she was proven completely right. Her son Peter grew up to run his own successful business. Her daughter Zara followed her mother's path into elite equestrian sport and won an Olympic silver medal of her own at the 2012 London Games. Both of them built genuine, independent lives, precisely because their mother had the wisdom and the love to shield them from the very spotlight she herself had never wanted. It was one of the greatest gifts a royal mother could give. And it came from a woman who understood, better than anyone, the burden that comes with being constantly watched. And the proof of how well that choice worked is written all over her children's lives. Zara, in particular, is a wonderful example of what Anne's philosophy made possible. Free from the constraints of a royal title, Zara was able to pursue her equestrian career with total dedication, competing on the world stage entirely on her own merit, and marrying a former England rugby star, building a happy, grounded family life largely outside the goldfish bowl of royal duty. Her brother Peter, too, forged his own path in the business world. Neither of them was ever expected to cut ribbons or perform official engagements as their full-time role, and both have spoken warmly of the ordinary childhoods their mother fought to give them. They rode horses, went to normal schools, and were raised above all to be capable, hardworking, and unspoiled, exactly as Anne herself had been. In refusing those titles, Anne wasn't rejecting the monarchy. She was simply making a clear-eyed, loving decision about what would truly be best for her children as human beings. And watching them thrive as independent adults, you can only conclude that she judged it exactly right. It was the decision of a mother first and a princess second, and it revealed the deep, protective love beneath that famously brisk exterior. And when you look at how Anne actually chooses to live, away from the public eye, the picture that emerges is of a woman who has built herself a life of genuine privacy and quiet contentment. Her home is not some grand, echoing London palace. It is Gatcombe Park, a beautiful but private 18th century manor house tucked deep in the Gloucestershire countryside, set on over 700 acres of quiet farmland and rolling hills. It is here, far from the crowds and the cameras, that Anne is truly herself. By all accounts, she rides her horses almost every single day, still breeds them, and has been patiently teaching her young granddaughters to ride, passing on the passion that has defined her whole life. She is often seen driving herself along the quiet country lanes in her own car. No grand motorcade, no fuss. She even has a beloved yacht and is a keen and capable sailor, taking to the water for the peace and freedom it brings. This is not the life of someone chasing fame. This is the life of someone who has quietly, deliberately built a world for herself where she can simply be a countrywoman who loves her horses, her land, and her family. It's the life she always wanted, and she has guarded it fiercely. What's remarkable is how she balances that fiercely private country life with a workload that would exhaust a person half her age. Because, make no mistake, the woman who so treasures her quiet hours at Gatcombe is also one of the busiest people in the entire country. Anne is famous for the sheer volume of the work she quietly takes on, supporting hundreds of charities and organizations, many of them small, unglamorous causes that would never draw a single camera. She has been devoted to one children's charity for over 50 years, visiting its projects in some of the poorest corners of the world, far from any spotlight, simply because the work matters. And here is the telling thing. She does all of this without ever seeking credit for it. She doesn't post about it. She doesn't give interviews boasting of her good deeds. She just quietly does the work, causes she genuinely cares about, and then goes home to her horses. It is service in its purest form, duty done for its own sake, with no expectation of thanks or applause. In many ways, that is the truest measure of her character. Anyone can do good works when the cameras are rolling. Anne does them precisely when no one is watching. And that is a kind of goodness that money and fame can never buy. Her practical, unfussy nature extends to every corner of her life. She is known to be genuinely economical, famously getting decades of wear out of favorite coats and dresses, having some of her beloved outfits carefully repaired and altered rather than simply replaced. In a royal world that can so easily tip into extravagance, Anne's thrift is almost radical. She sees waste as faintly ridiculous and grandeur as largely unnecessary. She would far rather spend an afternoon working with her horses than an hour being fussed over. There's a wonderful, grounded common sense to her, a sense that despite being born into unimaginable privilege, she has kept both feet firmly planted on the ground. It's this authenticity, this complete absence of pretension, that people find so deeply reassuring. In Anne, you feel you are seeing a real person, not a carefully managed royal image. And in a family that has sometimes struggled with that very thing, her plain-spoken realness is worth its weight in gold. Of course, no portrait of Princess Anne would be complete without celebrating that famous, no-nonsense character of hers, because it's a huge part of why the public has come to adore her. Anne is direct, she is practical, she does not suffer fools, and she has absolutely no time for pretension or fuss. She inherited this bracing, straight-talking manner from her father, Prince Philip, and it has produced some wonderfully dry moments over the years. When one well-meaning fan once handed her a bouquet and gushed that they had stayed up all night to prepare it, Anne reportedly replied with a twinkle, "You must be mad." When she was asked how she felt about the birth of her great-nephew Prince George, third in line to the throne, she cheerfully responded that it was, in her words, nothing to do with her, and simply carried on with her work. There is no false sweetness with Anne, no performance of warmth for the cameras. What you get is exactly what she is, honest, sharp, funny, and utterly without airs. She is also famously frugal and practical, known for wearing the same beloved outfits again and again for decades, seeing absolutely no reason to waste money on new clothes when the old ones work perfectly well. In a world of royal glamour and excess, there is something deeply refreshing and deeply real about a princess who simply cannot be bothered with any of it. Interestingly, the world has rather rediscovered Anne in recent years and fallen in love with her all over again. A whole new generation came to know her through her portrayal on screen in popular dramas, which captured her sharp wit and quiet strength, revealing her hidden charms to millions who had barely noticed her before. And when the monarchy faced its recent storms and upheavals, people increasingly turned their eyes to Anne and saw, with fresh appreciation, exactly what a steadying, dependable presence she had always been. Suddenly, her old-fashioned virtues, her discretion, her tireless work ethic, her refusal to complain or cause drama looked not dull at all, but genuinely admirable, even heroic. In an era weary of royal controversy, Anne came to represent something reassuring and solid, a link back to the quiet, dutiful values of her mother's long reign. The very qualities that had once kept her out of the spotlight became, in the end, the reason the spotlight came looking for her. And through it all, characteristically, Anne has remained utterly unchanged, unbothered by the new attention, simply carrying on with her work exactly as she always has, as if to say that a little late arriving admiration was never the point in the first place. And this, in the end, is the great and beautiful paradox at the very heart of Princess Anne. The royal who never wanted the spotlight has, precisely by never wanting it, earned the warmest and most genuine respect of all. Because the public, it turns out, can always tell the difference between someone performing for attention and someone quietly getting on with the job. And in Anne, they see the real thing. They see a woman who works tirelessly, year after year, decade after decade, without ever asking for thanks or praise. They see an athlete who competed with the toughest of them, a mother who put her children's well-being above royal grandeur, and a woman who has stayed true to herself through 75 years of dizzying change. She has never tried to be loved. She has simply been good and dutiful and real. And so the love came anyway, deep and lasting, the kind of respect that can never be manufactured and never be faked. In choosing substance over spectacle, Anne accidentally became the most admired royal of them all. So here, at the last, is the quiet, moving truth of it. We live in a world that constantly tells us we must be seen to matter, that attention is the measure of worth, that the loudest voice wins. And then there is Princess Anne, who has spent 75 years proving the exact opposite, that the deepest respect is earned not by seeking the light, but by doing good work in the shadows. That real strength is quiet. That a life of duty, honestly lived, needs no applause to have meaning. She never wanted the spotlight, and perhaps that is exactly why history will shine it on her anyway. And there is one final image that captures it all. When her beloved mother, Queen Elizabeth, passed away at Balmoral in 2022, it was Anne, the quiet, loyal daughter, who was there at her side, present in that most private and sacred of moments. No cameras, no fanfare. Just a daughter, faithful to the very end, exactly where she had always been, quietly beside the ones she loved, asking for nothing, giving everything. That is who Princess Anne truly is. Not the royal who wanted to be seen, but the royal who was always quietly there. And in a family so often defined by its noise, she may just be remembered as the finest of them all. Thank you so much for watching. If this tribute to the wonderful, one-of-a-kind Princess Anne touched you, please do let me know in the comments. Do you admire her quiet, no-nonsense dedication as much as we do? And isn't there something wonderful about a royal who never wanted the fame, yet earned our respect all the same? Until next time, take care.